Welcome to a night you won't forget. In this video, we bring you two terrifying tales from ordinary jobs turned horrifying, a grocery store haunted by cryptic rules and inhuman watchers, and a post office where breaking protocol means unleashing something unspeakable. These aren't just night shifts, they're survival tests. Turn off the lights, put on your headphone, and remember, some rules exist for a reason. Are you brave enough to follow them? Story 1. The night post office has rules you can't break. The town I live in isn't on any map you'd care to look at. It's the kind of place you drive through without even realizing, where the streetlights flicker like dying fireflies, and everything smells faintly of damp concrete and faded ink. People here don't talk much. When they do, it's in short, uncertain phrases, like their words might summon something they're not ready to face. Most towns have a post office that runs from 9 to 5. Ours opens only at night. That should have been my first clue. I got the job through an ad stapled to the bulletin board inside a gas station bathroom. Night clerk wanted. Easy work, good pay. That was it. No phone number, just an address scrawled in thin, looping handwriting that seemed to shimmer under the fluorescent light. I didn't think much of it at the time. I'd worked graveyard shifts before, 3 years running the till at a gas station that had more roaches than customers. I figured nothing could be lonelier than that. I was wrong. My first night on the job, I pulled into the lot a few minutes before 10 p.m. The building was a low concrete rectangle swallowed by shadows, its windows completely black. No cars in the lot, no lights on inside. The overhead lamp above the front door flickered as I approached, buzzing like a hornet stuck in a jar. For a moment I hesitated. Not because I was scared, at least not yet, but because the silence was absolute. No wind, no crickets, just the sound of my footsteps on cracked asphalt and my own breath clouding in the air. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The air was cold, unnaturally so, and smelled of aged paper, dust, and something faintly metallic, like old coins or dried blood. A soft humming came from the ceiling, where a single fluorescent bulb buzzed intermittently, casting long, warped shadows across the lobby floor. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing too loudly in the empty space. "Anyone here?" No response. I made my way to the main counter. A wide expanse of faded laminate separated me from rows of P.O. boxes, all of them sealed tight like mausoleum drawers. On the desk sat a single piece of paper, scented perfectly, as if it had been placed with great care. I leaned down to read. The handwriting was neat, sharp, confident. "Hi Carl, hope your first shift goes smoothly. I know you used to work nights at a gas station, so I imagine you're no stranger to the boredom and solitude. Still, you should know things are a little different here, and I mean that literally. Not many towns need a night clerk for a post office. There's a reason for that. But you'll see for yourself soon enough. This place doesn't explain. For itself, it shows you. You're not here because you love stamps. You're here because you need money. That's fine. I'm not going to pretend this is anything else. But your safety matters. So please, for your own good, follow these rules to the letter. Number 1. Never, under any circumstances, leave the post office between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Number 2. Don't look at the trick-or-treaters. Number 3. If you use the bathroom, wait 15 minutes before returning to the main desk. Number 4. When Fergus delivers the mail at midnight, thank him. Number 5. Never open the packages. Number 6. Don't answer the phone, even if I call. Number 7. If I turn up before 6 a.m., hide in the freezer. Good luck. Mr. Blackeye stared at the list for a long time, waiting for the punchline. But there was no prank camera, no hidden laughter behind the filing cabinets. Just me, the note, and a silence that stretched like rubber about to snap. Who hires a night shift clerk for a post office? The question wasn't rhetorical anymore. It echoed inside my skull like a warning bell. I was alone, and yet I wasn't sure. I could feel something watching, something waiting, and somewhere deep in my chest the first twinge of fear began to bloom. For the first couple of hours nothing happened. That should have been a relief, but it wasn't. The silence inside the post office was oppressive, like a heavy wool blanket wrapped too tightly around my thoughts. Every sound I made, every shuffle of my shoes, every breath I took, felt amplified in the vacuum. I busied myself checking the perimeter, walking the length of the single hallway that looped around the main sorting room and mailboxes, just to keep moving. Still, the unease clung to me like mildew. The air smelled wrong. Not foul exactly, just stale. Like the breath of something that had been sleeping a very long time and had just started to stir. I returned to the main desk, rereading the list of rules for the third time. They still looked absurd. Trick-or-treaters. It's April, I scoffed aloud, trying to shake off the creeping dread. Probably some hazing ritual, I muttered. Weird small-town humor. Spook the new guy. That explanation made the most sense, and yet something still didn't sit right. Around 11:45 p.m. I began hearing soft creaks from the mail sorting room. Just the wood of the old building settling, I told myself. But the sound repeated rhythmically, like slow, deliberate footsteps on tile. When I peeked in, there was nothing there. Just rows of dusty filing cabinets and stacks of sealed envelopes that hadn't been touched in weeks. I backed out and closed the door gently, not wanting to disturb whatever peace still existed in that room. I was seated again behind the desk, thumbing through the same sheet of rules like a rosary, when the phone rang. The shrill analog buzz of it sliced through the quiet like a knife. I jumped, my heart slamming against my ribs. The desk phone didn't have caller ID, just an old blinking red light and a rotary receiver. I stared at it, frozen. Rule 6, don't answer the phone. Even if I call, the ringing continued. After a full minute, it stopped. Then the voicemail. Clicked on, and a voice filled the room. Carl, it said. Calm, familiar, Mr. Black. Mind picking up so we can talk about the job a little more? I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Something about his tone. It was too casual, too smooth. As if it were trying just a bit too hard to sound normal. And why leave a rule like that in the first place, if he planned to call? The voicemail ended and the silence returned tenfold. I picked up the rules again, reading them slower this time. I hadn't misread it. Don't answer the phone, even if I call. There it was in ink, etched into the paper like a curse. Probably. A test, I told myself. Some kind of loyalty check wants to make sure I follow orders. I even laughed once, but it died quickly in my throat. Then the phone rang again. This time the voice was not calm. Carl, it rasped, distorted like it was coming through a broken speaker. It's rude to ignore people. Rude people. Get what they deserve. Something crashed near the front of the post office. I leapt from my chair. Through the dusty glass of the lobby window I caught a glimpse, just a blur, a shadow moving across the empty street. Fast, too fast. I stepped back instinctively, knocking the rule sheet to the floor. No employer, no matter how strange, would go to these lengths just to prank someone. And then came a knock, not from the front, from the back door. 3 firm knocks, then silence. I stared at the door, heart hammering against my ribs. My fingers twitched near the list of rules lying face down on the floor, the ink bleeding slightly from the sweat on my palms. I didn't need to read them again to remember what came next. Rule 4. When Fergus delivers the mail at midnight, thank him. Midnight had come, and so had Fergus. I stood there frozen, staring at the back door like it might vanish if I blinked hard enough. The knock hadn't come again, just those 3 sharp raps, calm, deliberate, confident. Not the pounding of something trying to break in, but of something that knew it would be let in. My feet didn't want to move. My gut screamed for me to lock the door, turn off the lights, and hide under the desk. But the rules? Rule 4 had been clear. When Fergus delivers the mail at midnight, thank him. Not accept it. Not sign for it. Not even speak to him. Just thank him. A transaction of gratitude. As if that was the only thing keeping something worse from happening, I approached the door slowly, each step a battle against every instinct in my body. The hallway was darker than I remembered, even though I hadn't turned off any lights. The faint hum of electricity still buzzed in the background, but the bulbs above flickered intermittently, casting broken shadows that shifted with my movement. When I reached the door, I hesitated. My fingers hovered over the latch. I could feel a presence on the other side. Not a heat or a cold, but a stillness like the air had thickened. I took a shaky breath, unlatched the door, and pulled it open. There he was, Fergus. He stood tall, maybe 6'3", with a thick hood pulled low over his face, obscuring all but the bottom of his jaw. His skin was pale, almost grey, and he didn't breathe. Not even the rise and fall of a chest beneath his coat. In his arms he cradled a large cardboard box, perfectly sealed, no markings, no address. I stared at him, and for the briefest second the light overhead steadied, and I saw his eyes, solid black. No whites, no irises, just endless void, like 2 coins dipped in tar. I nearly forgot to speak. The thank you, Fergus, I managed, my voice a whisper dragged from a throat gone dry. He didn't respond, didn't nod, didn't blink, but after a moment, he stepped backward into the darkness without a word, fading from view as if he'd been painted into the night and was now being erased. I stood there, trembling, still holding the package. The box was cold, not just cool to the touch, but actively cold, like it had been sitting inside a freezer. Yet it didn't drip with condensation. It didn't feel wet. It just was. I backed away from the door and shut it, locking it with hands that refused to stop shaking. I turned the bolt, double-checked it twice, and then carried the box to the sorting room. I set it down on the main table and stepped back like it might explode. I didn't look too long at it. I didn't want to. Because if I stared at that plain, unassuming cardboard long enough, I'd start to wonder what was inside. And I already knew the answer wasn't anything I'd want to see, but I knew this much. If I hadn't thanked him, if I'd just stood there, frozen or silent, something very bad would have happened. Fergus wasn't human anymore, and I wasn't sure if he ever had been. The box sat on the sorting table like a dormant animal, silent, unmoving, yet full of something that wasn't meant to be disturbed. I stood there for a long time, just staring at it from a distance, arms crossed tightly over my chest like I was trying to hold myself together. The overhead lights in the sorting room flickered with a slow, lazy pulse, and the cold from the package seemed to radiate outward, seeping into the metal legs of the table and the tile floor beneath my feet. I needed to distract myself, to think, to not think about what was in that box. So I started exploring. The sorting room was bigger than I'd expected, long and narrow, with rows of cubbies built into the walls, most of them empty or filled with outdated junk mail. Faded, priority stickers peeled from filing cabinets, and the smell of moldy paper clung to the air like rot. Dust lay thick across every surface. No one had worked here recently, or if they had, they hadn't cleaned up after themselves. But what caught my attention most wasn't the mess. It was the papers, stacks of them, towering haphazardly from the desks in the far corner, as if someone had printed thousands of documents and never filed a single one. I sifted through them, expecting delivery slips or old routing manifests. Instead, I found pages and pages of absolute nonsense, words that weren't words, jagged, curling lines that mimicked handwriting but held no meaning. It was like someone or something had tried to imitate human writing and failed. Some pages were just spirals. Others were rows of X's and O's, stretching from edge to edge in erratic patterns. I picked one up and stared at it, trying to force my brain to find order, but there was nothing there, no structure, no logic. They weren't meant for human eyes. My throat tightened as I turned over the last page in one pile and found something different. A notebook, tattered, leather-bound, and wedged between a cracked binder and a broken hole punch, and this name on the inside cover was printed in plain block letters, John Glass. It sent a jolt through me. Finally, I thought, something real, something that could explain what the hell was going on here. I flipped to the first page, expecting shift notes or maybe some sarcastic commentary about the night shift. Instead, I found something far more unsettling. Hey, new hire. If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. Or worse. Either way, sorry. You have no idea what you've stepped into. This job, this building, this town, none of it's normal. And if they had to replace me, it means the rules weren't enough. So here's what the original list didn't tell you. I sat down hard in the cracked rolling chair, the notebook trembling in my hands. I read through the next pages slowly, absorbing. Every line like it might be the difference between life and death. John hadn't just added context. He'd rewritten the rules completely, each one annotated with brutal honesty. He confirmed my unease about the trick-or-treaters, warned me in bold red ink never to open the packages, and he wrote about Fergus, too, about how the delivery had changed him, about how it had changed everyone. John's tone wasn't hysterical, it was tired, hollow. The voice of someone who had spent far too long in the dark. And with every line I read, one truth became clearer. This job wasn't about sorting mail. It was about surviving the night. I looked up from the notebook, suddenly, aware of how quiet the post office had become again, too quiet, as if the building itself were holding its breath, waiting to see whether I'd play along or end up like John. I didn't know yet what had happened to him, but I had a sinking feeling I was going to find out. John's notebook didn't waste time with pleasantries. After the extended commentary on the rules, he launched straight into a confession, a raw, unfiltered account of what had happened, and more importantly, why the rules existed in the first place. I read with a mounting sense of dread as he peeled back the thin curtain over the post office's true purpose. It wasn't a mail center, it wasn't even a business. It was a gateway, a delivery hub for something that never should have been sent. John had broken Rule 5, and everything fell apart after that. He wrote that it started with curiosity. Of course it did. Months into his own shifts, back when he was still pretending, this was just an eerie gig with a few local legends and a spooky old building. He had let his guard down. Maybe it was a quiet night. Maybe Fergus had been especially silent. Maybe the weight of not knowing simply became too much. Whatever the reason, John had done what the rules warned against. He opened the package, and then he looked at what was inside. He never described it in exact terms. He made it clear he wouldn't, even if he could. He'd scratched out entire paragraphs in thick black ink, leaving behind only cryptic phrases. It shimmered in the wrong direction. It showed me things I couldn't forget. I saw a version of myself with no eyes and too many mouths. Whatever was in the box, it wasn't inert. It was alive. Not in the way an animal is alive, with breath and blood and movement, but in the way an idea can be alive. It latched onto him, John wrote, slithered into his thoughts, nested in the corners of his dreams, and it offered him something in return. Power. Not the kind you can measure in money or position, but the kind that makes you feel like you matter. Like the town that never noticed you suddenly saw you standing in the middle of the room. Like everyone who had ever ignored you now hung on your every word. It was intoxicating. And John, despite what he might have believed about himself, was only human. So he did the unthinkable. He started opening the other packages. At first he only peeked, glimpses, just long enough to feel the warmth of it, like a junkie holding his fix without using. But soon he couldn't stop. He started taking pieces, small invisible bits he said couldn't be seen or weighed, and distributing them around town. No one questioned it. In fact, people wanted it. They hungered for it. Whatever that thing was, it changed people. It made them feel it complete, but it also took something in return. The town began to shift. Sadly, then all at once, the people weren't just different, they were wrong. Their eyes turned black, their shadows moved independently. They stopped blinking, some stopped sleeping, some stopped speaking, their mouths frozen in wide, silent smiles that stretched too far across their faces. They would gather around the post office every night, waiting, hoping. And John kept feeding them. For a cut, for favor, for validation. Until one day Fergus stopped speaking entirely and delivered his package without making a sound. That was when John knew it was too late. It wasn't just in the boxes anymore, he wrote. It was in us. He tried to stop. Tried to lock the doors, burn the packages, even quit the job. But quitting wasn't that simple, not once you'd let it in. Something about the exposure had changed him too. He wasn't addicted in the same way the townspeople were. His need was more subtle, more embedded. He craved its presence like a second heartbeat. "I don't want to stay," he confessed in one of the final entries, "but I can't imagine leaving. I don't think I'm capable of living anywhere else now. I think it knows I belong to it." It became clear that the post office wasn't just protecting the packages from outsiders. It was protecting the world from the packages and from the town that had already been corrupted by them. That's why the rules existed. That's why the doors stayed locked from 10 to 6. Not to protect the building, but to cage everything inside it. I looked up from the notebook and turned to glance at the box on the table. Still sealed. Still waiting. My fingers twitched. Just once, I thought. Just a peek. Just to understand. But then I heard John's voice in my head again. "Never open the parcels. Just know that it changed this town. It showed me things that mesmerized me, and I haven't been the same since." I stood up, shoved the notebook into my backpack, and stepped away from the table. Because I understood something now. Something terrifying. That box didn't need to be opened to get inside your head. It was already knocking. The sound came softly at first. A tap. Then another. Then a long, high-pitched giggle that sliced through the silence like a razor across silk. I was still in the sorting room, the notebook clutched tightly to my chest. The lights had dimmed again without warning, leaving the edges of the room blurred and uncertain. I froze in place. The giggling came again, higher, closer, followed by the unmistakable sound of small hands slapping against glass. I didn't want to look, but I knew exactly what it was. Rule 2. Don't look at the trick-or-treaters. The words pulsed in my head like a migraine. I eased the door to the sorting room shut behind me, careful not to let it click too loudly. My legs carried me to the edge of the main lobby, but I stayed low, ducked behind a filing cabinet. From there I could see their shadows flickering against the frosted glass of the front windows. 3 figures, child-sized, cloaked in black. It was 4 a.m. 2 more hours until sunrise. 2 more hours until I could leave. Just stay hidden, I told myself. Don't look directly at them, don't make a sound. But I couldn't help it. I needed to know if the door was locked. I needed to know if they were getting in. I moved to the edge of the counter and peeked out. 3 children stood at the door, if you could call them that. Each of them was around 5 feet tall, wearing long tattered cloaks and masks. One had a jack-o'-lantern face, carved in cruel angles. The others wore classic Dracula masks, but they sagged and warped as if left too long in the heat. Their small gloved hands tapped gently against the glass in rhythm. Then, without warning, they stopped. My heart stalled in my chest. They turned in perfect unison and looked directly toward the sorting room door. They hadn't seen me. Not yet, but I'd looked at them. I held my breath and began inching backward, planning to retreat and barricade myself in the bathroom until morning. But in my panic, I misjudged the space behind me. My elbow struck a metal tray of clipboards, sending it clattering to the tile. The sound echoed like a gunshot. All three heads snapped around instantly. The children stared through the glass directly at me. And then, moving in eerie synchronicity, they lifted their small hands to their faces and began to remove their masks. "No," I whispered. Too late. Their faces weren't faces. They were grins, skin stretched into crescent smiles that reached up to their ears, lined with sharp, wet teeth, and their eyes completely black, bottomless, as if someone had bored holes into their skulls and filled them with ink. The pumpkin-headed one tilted its head and spoke in a distorted voice that sounded like a cassette tape dragging through tar. "Why, yes," it hissed. "I'd love to come inside, Mr. Postman. Just open the door." I wanted to run. My body didn't listen. My legs carried me, not of my own will, toward the front door, like I was being pulled on puppet strings. My hand rose against my will and hovered over the latch. The smile outside widened. Just then, barely, mercifully, I regained control. I screamed and staggered backward, heart pounding, and bolted for the only door I could remember locking, the bathroom. Behind me, the children giggled and tapped again, louder, faster, eager. I slammed the bathroom door behind me and locked it. My chest heaved. My skin was soaked in cold sweat. And then I heard the creak of the door outside. One of them had entered the building. Footsteps padded across the tile, light as a feather, wrong in how they landed. Like the child weighed nothing at all. Then I saw it. A single black eye pressed between the cracks of the stall, watching me. I squeezed my eyes shut and prayed it couldn't open the door, prayed it didn't know my name. I stayed in that stall for what felt like an hour. Time bent itself into impossible shapes in the darkness, slowing to a crawl, then snapping forward with every sound from beyond the door. The children's giggles eventually faded, slowly, like a dying music box winding down, but the silence that followed wasn't comforting. It was worse. Something had taken their place. At first, it was just the sound of dripping, steady, wet. Then, a scraping, like nails etched across tile, too slow, too deliberate. It moved across the lobby floor with a slithering hiss, then paused right outside the bathroom door. I clutched John's notebook to my chest, too afraid to breathe. One line burned itself into my memory like a holy verse. If you use the bathroom, wait at least 15 minutes before returning to the main desk. Not because of the children, because of what comes out of the packages, whatever was inside them. It didn't always stay inside, and when it got loose, it wandered. But if you waited, it would go back. It always went back. So I waited, teeth clenched, eyes wide. The thing outside didn't make sense, even in sound. Its movements weren't rhythmic or purposeful. They were disjointed, organic in the wrong way. Sometimes it dragged something behind it. Sometimes it scraped the walls as if mapping the boundaries of its cage. And sometimes, when it stopped moving altogether, I could feel it listening. Once, it even breathed. A dry, whispering inhale that filled the entire room like wind across bone. I imagined it slithering back into the package, folding itself up like paper, compressing into the box until the lid sealed itself with unnatural precision. I didn't dare check. Instead, I counted slowly. 15 minutes, and then 5 more, just in case. By the time I stepped out, the post office was silent again. The floor was dry. The lights buzzed weakly overhead, casting dim halos across the tile. The package sat where I had left it, untouched. But now, I knew what lived inside wasn't a metaphor. It wasn't paranoia or hallucination. It was real, and it had seen me. By the time I returned to the front desk, the clock on the wall read 5 a.m. 1 more hour. I stared at that clock like it was a lifeline. The second hand ticked in slow, dragging movements, each one reminding me that I hadn't died yet, but I wasn't safe either. My pulse had finally slowed, and for a moment, I let myself believe that the worst of it was over. The children were gone. The thing from the package had crawled back to wherever it came from. I was still alive, but I had forgotten the 7th rule. If I turn up before 6 a.m., hide in the freezer. It arrived like a whisper behind my thoughts. And as if summoned, by my own memory I heard it. The voice, low, familiar, wrong. Carl, it said. And the way it drew out my name turned my blood to ice. It was soft, deliberate, and almost amused, like a parent humoring a child who had disobeyed. I turned toward the front window. There he was, Mr. Black. Or at least, something wearing his face. He stood on the other side of the glass, illuminated by the soft grey light of the coming dawn. His appearance was both perfect and completely off. The suit was the same, the coat, even the posture. But his face, oh God, his face, hung too low, like his jaw had unhinged. His mouth was gaping wide open, too wide, a dark void that nearly reached his collarbone. His eyes were bottomless pits, just like the children's. His skin was colorless, like an old photograph drained of every human quality. "Why didn't you answer my call, Carl?" he asked. I didn't respond. I couldn't, and I didn't need to. He moved, slowly at first, then faster, his arms stretched, unnaturally long and boneless, sliding under the crack of the door. I heard the sharp click of the lock unlatching. His fingers, long and spider-like, wrapped around the inside handle. I ran, not toward the exit, not to the desk, to the freezer. It was the only door in the entire building with a lock that didn't require electricity. I flung it open and hurled myself inside. Just as I turned the latch from the inside, I heard the front door burst open behind me. Something scuttled across the tile. Not footsteps, too many limbs, too many joints bending the wrong way. A sound followed it. Not quite a growl, not quite a laugh. Something in between. Something human-shaped, trying to remember how humans sounded. I backed against the far wall of the freezer, chest heaving, breath clouding in the cold. And just before the door shut completely, I caught a glimpse of it. It wasn't Mr. Black anymore. The thing in the lobby was no longer trying to wear his skin. Its real form spilled out. Spindly legs, crawling arms, a torso like a twisted marionette stripped of strings. It had too many eyes now. None of them blinked, and then the freezer door sealed with a thud. I was in the dark, and I could still hear it breathing outside, waiting. When the freezer door creaked open, light poured in, not the flickering fluorescence of the post office, but sunlight. Pale, golden, and unmistakably real. It was 6 a.m. The silence outside had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was relief, hollow and temporary, like the silence that follows a storm. My limbs were numb, my skin frost-bitten from the cold, but I moved anyway. I stumbled out of the freezer and through the lobby, stepping carefully over deep scratches carved into the tile that hadn't been there the night before. The front door stood wide open. Whatever had broken in was long gone. I didn't wait. I didn't look back. I crossed the parking lot with the morning sun at my back and didn't stop until my car was locked behind me and the engine coughed to life. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. My breath came in short, panicked gasps. I never went back to the night post office. I never spoke to Mr. Black again, whoever or whatever he was. I don't think I ever even saw him in town. Not really. If I did, I didn't recognize him. Maybe that was the point. Maybe no one really does. John Glass was right. The rules weren't just rules, they were a contract. And I had followed 6 of them, but there were 7. I still think about that 7th rule, about what might have happened if I'd hesitated, if I'd let the thing in, if I hadn't locked the freezer in time. I see it in my dreams sometimes. Those black eyes, that widening mouth, and most of all I think about the packages. What was inside them? What could possibly be so powerful, so contagious, that it could corrupt an entire town? I never opened one, but I still hear it calling, and some nights I almost answer. Story 2. Night shift at West Market. They told me it was just a grocery store, a place of fluorescent lights, checkout scanners, and expired coupons. But no one warned me about the things that lurked between the aisles, things that sobbed like children and watched you through cameras they shouldn't control. I took the night guard job because I was broke. I stayed because I wasn't allowed to leave. There were rules, strange ones, and breaking them wasn't just dangerous. It was fatal. This wasn't just some overnight gig. It was survival. And now, even with daylight streaming in, I'm still not sure I ever really left. 2 weeks before it all started, I saw the listing on a faded bulletin board outside a gas station. Night guard wanted. West Market, Redacted, Pennsylvania. Midnight to 6 a.m. shift, $21 an hour. It sounded like easy money. 6 hours of solitude, maybe a few rounds around the store, and a warm break room to ride out the rest. But there was something off about it. What kind of grocery store needed a night guard when it wasn't even open? Was theft really that bad? Or was it something else? Still, money talks. I was behind on rent, scraping by on leftover canned soup, and overdue bills. I convinced myself it was just paranoia. Maybe there had been a break-in, a prankster messing with the produce, so I called the number. A man named Clive answered in a voice that sounded dry, overly calm and utterly unbothered. The interview lasted 3 minutes. No questions about my resume, no background check, just a welcome and a start date. The first night, I pulled into the nearly empty parking lot and immediately understood why they needed someone. The grocery store stood at the edge of a dying strip mall, surrounded by ghost storefronts with dusty glass and signs that read, "Space for rent," half faded, under the flicker of malfunctioning street lamps. The whole place looked like a forgotten limb of civilization, rotting but still twitching. As I approached the front doors, a woman exited the building in a rush. She nearly bumped into me. "You must be Aaron," she said, out of breath. "The night guard." I nodded. "Yeah, that's me. Clive left you some instructions," she added quickly, not making eye contact. "They're on the conveyor belt at Register 1. Before I could even ask her name, she turned and made a beeline for the only other car in the lot. I called, "After her." "Hey, wait, what's your—" But she was already slamming her door shut. The engine roared to life, tires screeched across the cracked asphalt, and then she was gone. So much for friendly co-workers. I turned back toward the store. The parking lot was completely empty now. The nearest street lamp sputtered with a strange rhythm, like a heartbeat struggling to stay alive. A gust of cold wind rushed past, lifting a crumpled paper bag and sending it tumbling across the pavement like a dead thing that wouldn't stay down. I stood in front of the automatic doors. They squeaked open, and a rush of overly bright light spilled out like a spotlight on a stage I didn't want to walk onto. I took a breath, muttered, "Here goes nothing," and stepped inside. The doors hissed shut behind me, and with that, the silence of the lot was replaced by the soft, cheerful Hum of jazz music playing from nowhere. The store looked perfectly normal, but I already knew something wasn't right. The moment I stepped inside, the contrast was jarring. Outside was dead and lifeless, but the interior of the store was pristine. Clean white tiles, sparkling aisles, and overhead fluorescent lights that buzzed gently. From hidden speakers, a soft, upbeat jazz melody drifted through the air. Something with a saxophone and lazy drums, looping endlessly like it had nowhere else to go. I took a few cautious steps forward, unsure if I'd walked into a grocery store or the opening scene of a surreal dream. I remembered what the woman had said, Register 1. I made my way past the neatly aligned checkout counters. Register 1 was closest to the exit, and sitting atop its conveyor belt was a single folded sheet of paper. No envelope, no signature, just a plain white page, creased neatly down the center. I picked it up and opened it, expecting a checklist or some security protocol. What I got instead was a list of rules. Dear Aaron, welcome to the West family. We sincerely hope that you enjoy your first shift. To help you, we've compiled a list of rules that should make your shift as easy as our fresh-baked apple pie. Rule 1. As night guard, you are expected to patrol the store every half hour. Make sure nothing is amiss. Between patrols, you may rest in the break room at the back of the store and monitor the security camera feeds. Rule 2. Do not go down aisle 7. Do not look down aisle 7. Rule 3. If you hear a knocking sound from inside the freezers in the frozen food section, ignore it. Rule 4. If you see a shopping cart that hasn't been returned, bring it to the front of the store immediately. Rule 5. Do not be alarmed if you find a pool of blood in the meat aisle. Our packages sometimes leak. Use the mop and bucket in the storage closet to clean it, but do not step in or touch the blood. Rule 6. If you see a woman in the store, immediately go to the break room and stay there until she leaves. Do not engage. Do not make eye contact. Do not call the police. Rule 7. The music playing in the store is a pre-recorded disc. If the music ever stops, immediately go to the break room and remain there until it resumes. Rule 8. Do not under any circumstances end your shift early. Thanks again. Enjoy your shift. Clive, I stared at the page, rereading it slowly. Once. Twice. Then a third time, just to make sure I wasn't missing some sort of prank or hidden camera joke. But the more I read, the colder my stomach felt. These weren't security guidelines. These were warnings. Avoid aisle 7. Ignore knocking. From the freezer. Don't make eye contact with the woman. None of it made sense. I'd worked late-night gigs before. Bars, clubs, even a warehouse. But never had I been handed anything like this. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that I was being watched. I glanced up at one of the security cameras in the corner, its little red light blinking silently. Maybe this was some kind of loyalty test, an absurd checklist to weed out the flaky hires. Maybe Clive was watching me right now, waiting to see if I'd follow these ridiculous instructions to the letter. Okay, I muttered, trying to sound brave even if no one could hear me. Challenge accepted. I folded the paper and slid it into my jacket pocket. The overhead jazz continued its aimless drifting tune, almost mocking me. It was 12:06 a.m., time to begin my first patrol. With the rules rattling around in my head like a bad nursery rhyme, I took one last glance at the break room door down the back hallway, then turned toward the aisles. This job was about to get weird. The store was deathly quiet beneath the smooth jazz and fluorescent hum. I began my patrol like I was told, walking past the bakery section, now emptied and draped with opaque plastic to preserve freshness. Each step echoed faintly on the polished tile, accompanied only by the occasional creak from the ceiling or the hum of a fridge motor. There were no shoppers, no announcements, no ringing registers, Just me and this strange, sterile world behind glass doors. The shelves were fully stocked. Cookies, sauces, cereal, canned soups, all aligned with obsessive precision. It should have been comforting, but the perfection felt wrong. Manufactured. Like the store was pretending to be alive, I turned right into the meat aisle. The cooler displays were veiled with semi-clear plastic sheets, hiding slabs of ribeye and bone-in sirloins, like bodies behind hospital curtains. The meat glistened darkly in the faint light, and I had to look away. I've never been squeamish, but there's something about raw meat in the quiet that feels too close to death. I moved on, counting off the aisles in my head. Aisle 3, pasta. Aisle 4, snacks. Aisle 5, aisle 6. I stopped. My eyes flicked forward, instinctively. Aisle 7 was right there. The rule slammed into my head like a hammer. Do not go down aisle 7. Do not look down aisle 7. I stared at the floor, locking my gaze on the speckled white tiles. My heart quickened. This was so stupid. What was I expecting? A monster playing peekaboo between cans of soup? Still, I kept my head low and forced myself forward, refusing even to glance at the shelf labels as I passed. I didn't want to give the cameras any reason to mark me as disobedient. Not on my first shift. I made it to the far end of the store and found the break room door, brown, plain, and unmarked except for a small square window, blacked out from the inside. I took mental note of its location and told myself I'd settle. In there, once the patrol was done, I began walking back toward the front. That's when I saw it, a shopping cart, parked diagonally in the middle of the frozen food aisle. I sighed. Rule number 4, return any stray carts to the front. I was a night guard, not a stock boy, but fine. I grabbed the handle and began pushing it down the tile. Its wheels rolled smoothly, almost too smoothly, like it wanted to be moved. That's when I heard it, a soft, nearly imperceptible sound. It floated just beneath the music. I stopped. Jazz played on as if nothing were wrong, but I strained my ears trying to pick it up again. There. A faint sob, wet, broken. A voice crying. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. That sound, it wasn't just some building noise or pipe creak. It was human, a woman, maybe even a child. I turned slowly, heart thudding. "Hello?" I called, not too loud. "Is someone there?" The sobbing stopped, a beat of silence. Then it returned, louder now, wailing, shaking. Panic slid down my spine, like ice water. The store was locked. I was the only one here, unless someone had gotten trapped before closing. The woman in the parking lot, she might have missed someone still inside. A kid hiding in the aisles. "I'm coming!" I shouted, abandoning the cart and jogging toward the sound, but then I skidded to a halt. The crying, it was coming from aisle 7. My stomach knotted. Do not go down aisle 7. Do not look down aisle 7. I stood just beside it now, the end cap display of mayonnaise blocking my view. I pressed my back to the end cap, heart racing, trying to peek without looking. "I'm going to help you," I said, my voice shaking. "Can you come toward me? Just step out and I'll help." The voice sobbed louder, then answered, "Help me, please." Something was wrong. The tone was off. The words were spaced too perfectly. Every "help me" had the exact same stutter at the beginning, the same rise in pitch on "me." It didn't sound natural. It sounded like a broken recording, played on loop. "Come out of the aisle," I called again. "Just step into the open, then I can help." No answer. Only louder, more frantic crying. A sick twist formed in my gut. I suddenly didn't want to help. I didn't want to see whatever was sobbing in that aisle. I stepped back, gripping the edge of a display case, trembling. My brain knew better. This was a trap. Whatever it was, it wanted me to come closer. I hesitated. Maybe I could grab my phone, call someone, but it was in my backpack. At register 1, which meant crossing aisle 7, but the rules didn't say I couldn't walk past aisle 7, just not into it. Heart hammering, I clenched my fists and whispered, "Just walk fast. Don't look. Just go." I took a breath and stepped forward. The moment my foot hit the tile in front of aisle 7, the crying stopped. Dead silence, and then footsteps, fast, heavy, slapping against the floor, coming straight from the aisle. I didn't look, I couldn't look. I ran, blindly, instinctively, past the registers, down the corridor, and into the break room, slamming the door behind me. I collapsed into the chair, gasping for air, sweat soaking my back. The rules hadn't been joking. Something was waiting in that aisle, and it knew my name. The break room was small, just a cramped, windowless box with beige walls, a mini fridge humming in the corner, and a battered desk with a dusty computer monitor flickering in grayscale. A faint smell of burnt coffee lingered, in the air, stale and oddly comforting. I slammed the door behind me and turned the lock with trembling fingers. The silence was crushing, broken only by the soft clink of the metal doorknob as it settled. My pulse pounded in my ears. I pressed my back to the door, trying to listen for footsteps, for sobs, for anything. But there was nothing, just the faint jazz still playing overhead through the store's speakers, now dulled by the door's thickness. I turned to the monitor. It was already on, set to cycle through the security camera feeds. The resolution was low, grainy black and white footage with slight static, but it gave me a full view of the store. I watched it flip from the meat aisle to produce, to the front registers. I flipped through the feeds manually, one by one, looking for aisle 7, but it wasn't there. There were cameras for every single aisle, except 7. I blinked, disoriented, then went back again to double-check. Nothing. The camera angles seemed deliberately chosen to avoid that section of the store. Even the ones on either side, aisle 6 and 8 cut just before 7, came into frame, like someone had intentionally left a blind spot. I sat back in the chair, ice crawling down my spine. That wasn't a coincidence. The rules hadn't just warned me about aisle 7. They had designed the surveillance system to exclude it. That meant they knew something was wrong with it, planned around it. I glanced toward the door, then down at the paper still in my pocket. I pulled it out and read the list of rules again, this time slower, more carefully. Each one carried a different kind of weight now. Rule number 2, don't look at aisle 7. That had almost killed me. Rule number 3, ignore knocking in the freezers. Rule to avoid the woman. And rule number 8, don't end your shift early. Who was Clive? Why would anyone need these rules unless something terrible had happened before? Was I being tested, monitored, or worse? Was I just the latest poor idiot thrown into a meat grinder no one wanted to acknowledge? My hands were shaking. I closed, my eyes trying to push the thoughts out of my head. Just finish the shift, follow the rules. 6 hours. That's it. I breathed in deeply, letting the faint hum of the fridge and the occasional crackle from the speaker soothe my nerves. Then I opened my eyes and looked again at the monitor. The image was still scrolling through the feeds, one every few seconds. Nothing moved, but that didn't make me feel safer. It made me feel like the store was holding its breath, like everything had retreated into the walls, watching, waiting. The rules weren't guidelines, they were boundaries. Invisible fences keeping monsters in their lanes and me in mine. And the worst part? I wasn't sure the break room was on my side of the fence. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, itching to type something, to reach out to someone. But the computer wasn't connected to the internet. It was just a closed-loop system. I was locked in, literally and figuratively. I leaned back and rubbed my face, exhausted already. It was barely 12:30, 5.5 hours to go. The jazz melody looped through the speaker again, a cheerful saxophone line skipping slightly as if the track had been copied too many times. I stared at the clock. Time for my next patrol. I stood at the door of the break room, hand trembling on the knob. The silence outside pressed against the walls, thick and heavy, almost expectant. I didn't want to leave, not after what had happened near aisle 7, but I knew the rules. Every 30 minutes, like clockwork. Skipping a patrol wasn't an option, not if I wanted to see morning. I counted to 3, threw the door open and slipped into the corridor. The store was quiet, unnaturally so. The jazz was still playing, though the notes felt slower now, as if the saxophone itself was tired. I walked briskly past the meat aisle, then through the snacks and canned goods, trying to keep my eyes forward, head low, just like before. When I turned into the frozen food section, I stopped dead in my tracks. There it was, a pool of blood. It stretched across the tile like spilled wine, thick and glossy under the fluorescent lights. At first I thought maybe it was a trick of the lighting, some spilled sauce or dye, but as I moved closer, the smell hit me, coppery, sharp, undeniably real. My stomach turned. Rule number 5 came back to me instantly. Do not be alarmed if you find a pool of blood in the meat aisle. Use the mop and bucket from the storage closet. Do not step in it, do not touch it. Technically, this was the frozen aisle, not the meat section, but I figured the rules still applied. I backed away carefully, tracing a clean path around the dark liquid. My eyes flicked over the tiles to make sure I wasn't about to step into a stray splash. Then I turned and made a beeline for the storage closet I'd passed earlier. It took me a moment to find the mop. It leaned crookedly against the wall next to a grey bucket half filled with stagnant water. I wheeled it out, every squeak of the wheels magnified in the silence. The jazz played on, its melody feeling more and more like a sick joke. Back in the frozen aisle, I got to work. I dipped the mop in the water, sloshed it onto the floor, and started scrubbing. The blood smeared at first, then slowly faded as I rinsed and repeated. Each stroke made me more nauseous, especially when the diluted red water splashed close to my shoes. I flinched and pulled back. Do not touch it, I reminded myself. Not even accidentally. It took nearly 10 minutes, but I finally cleaned the whole thing. The floor still looked stained, faintly pink in the light, but at least it was dry. I returned the mop and bucket, double-checked my shoes, and wiped my hands on my jeans, though I hadn't touched anything directly. I was about to head back toward the break room when I heard it. Knock just one, a hollow tap, then another knock-knock. It came from the freezer doors. I turned slowly, scanning the long line of glass panels lining the wall. They were all fogged with condensation, but I could still see faint shapes inside. Frozen dinners, bags of peas, blocks of ice cream, and then another knock. Knock, knock, knock. It was louder now, closer. Something inside was knocking. Rule number 3 echoed in my brain. If you hear knocking from the freezers, ignore it. Every part of me wanted to walk up to the door, wipe the condensation away, and see what was tapping from the inside. Curiosity clawed at my chest like a wild animal. What if it was a bird trapped behind the glass? Or a mouse? Or no, not a mouse. The knocks were too deliberate, too rhythmic. I took a cautious step back, keeping my gaze on the freezer. I counted the knocks. 1, 2, 3. A pause, then 4 in rapid succession. It almost sounded like a code, like something was trying to communicate. But the rules said ignore it, not investigate, not solve, just walk away. So I did. Step by slow step, I backed away from the freezer section and into the main aisle. The knocking faded behind me, muffled now by distance and music. My heart was still racing, but I'd followed the rules. I hadn't looked too close. I hadn't tried to open anything. I passed the bakery section, then the snacks. All the way, back toward the break room. But just before I reached the door, I stopped. The shopping cart was back, the one I'd abandoned earlier near aisle 7. It now stood neatly beside one of the front registers, just sitting there, as if someone had checked out and left it behind. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't moved it, and no one else was supposed to be here. Slowly, cautiously, I approached it. I didn't touch the handle, just stared. Empty. But it didn't matter. Something or someone had moved it. I turned toward the glass doors at the front of the store. The parking lot beyond was pitch black, not a single streetlight working now. Everything out there was a thick curtain of shadow. The carts were just outside. Only a few feet away. I hesitated, then made a decision. I pushed open the doors, shoved the cart into the row as quickly as I could, and sprinted back inside, slamming the door behind me. Relief surged through me, and then I noticed the music had stopped. The store was dead silent. My blood froze. Rule 7. If the music ever stops, immediately go to the break room and stay there until it resumes. I didn't wait. I ran, full speed, past the aisles, around the registers, down the back corridor and into the break room. I locked the door and collapsed into the chair, lungs heaving. The store had gone quiet, and something out there was listening. I sat in the break room with my hands clasped tightly in my lap, staring at the wall like it might offer answers. The jazz music hadn't resumed. The silence pressed in from every direction, thick and unnatural, like the store itself was holding its breath. I checked the camera feeds again. Nothing moved. No signs of anyone, just empty aisles and soft static. I glanced at the clock. 2:29 a.m. Time for another patrol. My legs protested as I stood up. The adrenaline spikes from earlier had left me, drained, and every patrol was starting to feel like a death sentence disguised as routine. Still, I knew the rules. I couldn't skip it. Not unless I wanted to find out what breaking them really meant. I opened the door slowly and stepped out. The store welcomed me with its usual cold brightness, fluorescent lights humming overhead like nothing was wrong. I moved quickly, determined to get through this patrol faster than the last. Every 30 minutes, just one lap. That's all. I was halfway through the canned goods aisle when I saw something move from the corner of my eye. I stopped. A faint silhouette. Down one of the center aisles, aisle 9. Someone was standing there, perfectly still. I backed up a few steps and looked again, heart pounding. A woman. She stood with her back to me, facing the shelves as if she were shopping. She wore a pale blue linen dress that hung loosely on her thin frame, and a pair of black, high heels that clicked sharply against the tile as she slowly shifted her weight. Her long black hair spilled down her back, reaching almost to her waist, too smooth, too still. In her left hand, she held a plastic basket. Inside were several raw cuts of meat, flank steaks, ribs, chicken wings, dripping slightly through the slats. Red drops pattered silently onto the floor beneath her. My mouth went dry. Rule number 6. If you see a woman in the store, immediately go to the break room. Do not make eye contact. Do not engage. Do not call the police. I swallowed hard and took a careful step backward. My eyes dropped to the floor, refusing to rise. I couldn't risk it. I didn't know what eye contact meant to her, or to whatever she really was. I turned into the next aisle, using the shelving as cover, and began walking quickly toward the break room. But then I heard it. Click, a heel, click, click, another. She was following me. But the sound wasn't coming from behind me. It was coming from in front of me. I froze, stared at the ground, and that's when I saw them. 2 glossy black high-heeled shoes standing at the end of the aisle, just around the corner. I couldn't see her face, but she was there, blocking my way. Do not make eye contact. Do not engage. I turned slowly, trying to move backward. The tile felt slick beneath my feet. Behind me, the shelves loomed like walls. I had nowhere to go. Click. The shoes moved forward a step. I took one back. Click, click. She advanced. My heart pounded so loud I thought it might give me away. I backed up farther, retreating blindly. All I could see were those shoes and the drops of blood they left in their wake. I reached the end of the aisle and turned sharply, running now, breath tearing out of my lungs. I didn't even know where I was going. I just needed space. A way. Around somewhere to hide. But halfway down the next aisle I came to a halt. Shopping carts. Dozens of them. They had been stacked into a crude tower, blocking the path completely. I skidded to a stop just inches from slamming into the mess. The carts leaned precariously, nearly toppling. I couldn't go forward. I turned back. Too late. Click. Click, click. She was coming, slowly, methodically. Like a predator pacing its kill, I couldn't go back. I couldn't go forward. I darted left out of the aisle and straight into another, and I knew it instantly. Aisle 7. The air changed the moment I stepped across the threshold. It felt colder, denser, like something was pressing down on me, squeezing the breath from my chest. And there, curled on the floor, was it, a grey, misshapen lump, like someone had taken the form of a human and folded it in on itself, twisting, the limbs in all the wrong ways. It was clothed in tattered rags, blue skin blotched and tight over unnatural joints. It didn't have a head, just a mass where one might have been. It was crying, or at least it was making that sound. Low, raspy, wet, and then it moved, it unfolded slowly like something being born in reverse, limbs stretched out, longer than they should be, and knees cracked backward. The thing rose from the floor without ever standing. It just lifted. I turned and ran, screaming, back through the aisle, blood roaring in my ears. I didn't look. Back I couldn't. My mind was already unraveling from the glimpse I'd stolen. I cut right, bolted past the meat aisle around the final corner, and spotted the break room. My salvation. I lunged forward, slammed into the door, yanked it open, and dove inside. I locked the door behind me, gasping, collapsing onto the floor in a tangle of limbs and sweat and terror. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I didn't move, not for a while. Somewhere out there, beyond the walls, she was still walking, and now the thing in aisle 7 was awake. I sat crumpled on the break room floor, my breath hitching in ragged bursts. My entire body trembled, my lungs burned, and I felt like I'd run a marathon straight through hell. For a long moment, I couldn't do anything except stare at the locked door, watching, waiting, praying it wouldn't rattle or creak or open without warning. My mind replayed the last 5 minutes on a vicious loop. The woman's heels clicking toward me, the teetering tower of carts. The moment I'd realized I was in aisle 7, and that thing, bent and headless, unfolding like a nightmare drawn in reverse. I should have never taken this job. I pulled myself up, legs barely steady, and dragged my body to the desk. The monitor was still on, cycling lazily through the camera feeds. Grainy black and white footage flickered in front of me. Meat section, bakery, front doors, canned goods. Nothing moved. No signs of the woman, no trace of the thing. I flipped through the feeds faster, trying to reassure myself, and then I froze. She was there, standing completely still, directly in front of the break room door. At first glance, the image looked like a still photo. Her silhouette was lit faintly by overhead lights, casting her long hair like a shadowy curtain down her back. She held the same basket of raw meat, now dripping steadily onto the floor. The blood pooled silently around her heels. Her arms hung limp at her sides, fingers still and stiff. She didn't move, didn't blink, but I knew she was real, and she knew exactly where I was. I looked away from the monitor and toward the door. A thin shadow leaked underneath it. Her feet, unmoving. My stomach twisted. "Please go away," I whispered, more a breath than a voice. The shadow shifted. Her head tilted slowly to the side, a faint motion, like she was listening, contemplating, and for the first time, I understood why. The window on the break room door had been blacked out with taped construction paper. No one wanted to see what was waiting on the other side. I turned back to the screen, heart thundering. She was still there, but something was wrong with the way she stood. It took me a second to notice it. Her heels were facing forward, but so was her head. I blinked, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. She hadn't turned around, her body hadn't shifted, but I was looking at the back of her head and her face. Either her hair had somehow fallen over her face, or she had turned her head all the way around. A silent scream pressed at the back of my throat. I clenched my fists to keep from losing it, and then she moved. Not walked, moved. Like her body stuttered frame by frame, glitching between positions, lurching with each unnatural step. Her motions were jagged, sickening, like a puppet with broken strings. I watched her on the monitor as she slowly stepped back from the door, then up the wall. She crawled up the wall like an insect, head still twisted backward, face turned toward the camera. Her eyes met mine through the screen. They were pure white. No pupils, no irises, just milky orbs laced with spidery, veins bulging as if about to burst. I recoiled, my chair scraping backward against the floor. I clamped my hands over my face, sobbing quietly into my palms. Don't make eye contact. The rule didn't say in person. What if this counted? I peeked between my fingers. The camera feed showed her pushing out through the front doors of the store, moving like a spider on too many joints, her limbs bending the wrong way. And then she was gone, out into the night. But I knew she'd be back, because she knew exactly where to find me. I didn't move for a long time after she left. The camera showed nothing. Just empty aisles, the still front doors, and faint flickers of dust in the air under fluorescent light. But my body wouldn't stop shaking. My chest tightened every time I blinked, expecting to open my eyes and see her face pressed against the glass again, or worse, crawling along the ceiling behind me. I checked the clock. 3:58 a.m. Another patrol was due. I wanted to pretend I'd lost track of time, that I could skip just one without consequence, but the rules rang in my skull like a warning bell. Every 30 minutes, I forced my aching body upright and staggered toward the door. My limbs felt heavier now, like something was pressing down on me. Exhaustion, fear, or maybe something else entirely. I opened the door and sprinted. There was no pacing anymore. No cautious glances or planned paths. I moved like a scared animal, weaving through aisles, darting around corners, never looking where I wasn't supposed to, never stopping to process what I saw. And I did see things. Shopping carts stacked again, higher. This time dangerously tall, wobbling like a tower built by invisible hands. I saw smeared blood near the meat aisle, bright and fresh, even though I had just cleaned it earlier. I saw handprints in the freezer glass, not just one or two, dozens, all shapes and sizes. Some pressed flat like they were desperate to get out. Others dragged downward like they'd been pulled away. The fingers were wrong, too long, too thin, inhuman. And behind the frost, behind the fog on the glass, I could have sworn something moved. I didn't check. I didn't slow down. I reached the break room and slammed the door behind me, doubling over and gasping like I'd just escaped drowning. I was cracking. Whatever mental walls I had built were breaking down. I could feel them. The rules, the entities, the eyes. The entire store felt alive now, not in a metaphorical sense, but sentient. Watching, reacting, waiting. I popped open the soda I had brought in my backpack, but the carbonation hiss sounded too much like that creature's breath. I let it sit on the desk, untouched. The next patrol came at 4:30. This time I didn't even pretend to be brave. I walked like a ghost, flinching at every flickering light, every irregular sound. The jazz had returned, but it no longer felt like music. It felt like bait. The same melody on a loop, as if daring me to rely on it. As I passed the produce section, I saw labels I didn't recognize. Not a single familiar brand, just cans marked meat stew over and over, repeating like a glitch in the system. The same can, the same font, the same dent. And that's when I heard it again. The crying, soft, pitiful. From aisle 7. "Help me," it whimpered. "Help me!" I froze, but I didn't run this time. I didn't investigate either. I stood there, staring at the floor, letting the tears slip silently from my own eyes. I was losing myself. I wasn't just afraid anymore. I was unraveling, bit by bit, like the rules weren't just keeping me alive, but also keeping me here, bound. As if every time I followed them, I was sinking deeper into the store's grip. I stumbled back into the break room and collapsed in the chair. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, wide-eyed, staring at nothing. There were still 2 hours left, and I didn't know if I'd survive them with my mind intact. The minutes dragged like molasses. Every tick of the second hand sounded louder, heavier, like it was chiseling time into stone. I didn't even patrol for the last round. I simply walked a few steps out of the break room, counted to 30, and returned, my spirit too fractured to do more than survive. And then, at last, the clock struck 6. The store didn't cheer. No lights flickered triumphantly. No music shifted to a new track. But I felt it, like a thread had snapped inside me. The night was over. I approached the front doors, shaky but determined, nearly tripping over a single overturned cart. My legs felt weak, but they carried me. Through the glass I saw the soft glow of dawn breaking across the lot, pale pink bleeding into grey skies. Cars were pulling in. Familiar silhouettes climbed out. Employees in worn uniforms clutching coffees and yawning like the world was normal. I didn't wait to greet them. The moment the first one reached the door, I burst out past them without a word. I didn't care what they thought of the new guy. I didn't care if I looked insane. My car was the only thing on my mind. That and escape. I climbed in, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands were shaking as I turned the ignition. The engine caught on the first try, and that almost made me cry. I pulled out of the lot and turned onto the main road, not looking back once I'd made it. The farther I drove, the lighter I felt, as if each mile between me and that cursed grocery store peeled something off my skin. I rolled down the windows, breathed, smiled for the first time in hours. Then I turned on the radio. I expected rock, news, static. Instead, a soft saxophone floated through the speakers, cheerful, upbeat, familiar, the same jazz loop. My blood turned to ice. I checked the frequency. It wasn't the station I usually played. I hadn't even touched the dial, and yet it was still playing. I stared into the road ahead, heart pounding again. Whatever West Market was, it wasn't finished with me. And deep down, I realized something horrifying. My shift had never really ended. Thank you for venturing into the darkness with us. If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't keep the fear to yourself. Leave a comment, smash that like button, and share this video with someone who dares to listen in the dark. We release terrifying true stories every week, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's lurking in the shadows. This is High Scare Stories, where nightmares don't end when the video does. Until next time, stay safe and stay scared.